everyone. Let's try and wrap up September. September was kind of weird time-wise, experimental-wise, brain-wise, I don't know. I noticed I only uploaded my letter to the month and a book review. So let's start with the book, Sorrow and Bliss. I started the month reading this book, being all invested and emotionally up and down and really caught up in the story. I really, really enjoyed it. But the reading experience was very hard. The book is about this young woman and her experience with her mental health. So we find out everything through her perspective. She's the narrator. We see everything through her eyes. And in the beginning, the narration jumps around in time, back and forth, very short paragraphs, chapters of what is going on. And I really, really like that. But then we get into a more chronological narration of her experience with her marriage, which is at the center of the book. The experience of her marriage and with her husband and how things go with her mental health. That part dragged a little bit for me because it felt repetitive and you started to really, really get annoyed by the person while you're at the same time feeling I should have patience with her and sympathy and all the things, but she was mostly annoying. And then things shift. She gets a diagnosis and things change. And we also get more from others, how they see her, how they deal with her disease and everything. And it's fascinating the way this is written, how you're involved and in the story. I really felt emotionally drained afterwards, but it was also very rewarding to read this book. So after this experience, I wanted like a palate cleanser. I wanted something short and quick, something fluffy, something I didn't really have to be emotionally invested in a dramatic way. So I looked for a novella and I went to an author that I always find has a lot of novellas that I haven't read yet and they're hit or miss for me. And this one was definitely a hit. So I decided to give Of Dragons, Feasts and Murders a go. I didn't know anything about it. Apart from that, it was short and I loved it. The book is set in Paris and it follows this couple of a dragon prince and then fallen angel, and they're visiting the dragon prince's family in the dragon kingdom, which is under the Seine and in Paris. And Paris is suffering after a great war between all the houses where those two are heads of now in the world. And I was immediately in love with the characters, with the magic world and the world in general, and the shape-shifting dragons and other creatures there. So I went and read the second of Charms, Ghosts and Grievances, which is also another novella and has the same character starring and another kind of murder mystery going on and adventure. And I was all for it. And then I discovered that those two characters and the series is a spin-off series of The Dominion of the Fallen, which is a 3-book series. Maybe there's a 4th book coming one day. At the moment, there's only 3 full-length novels, so I went and read those. I found myself with the first book a little bit disappointed because the Dragon Prince isn't really there. He doesn't exist yet, or he probably exists because he's old, but he's not part of the story yet. And in the novel, we're not having a murder at the center, but we get to know the world in Paris with the houses. That's where it's centered. And this one house that especially has the problem of being cursed, or there's a curse falling onto this house and things happen. In the second book, we finally get the Dragon Prince, and there's more between the connection between the houses and the dragon world, where the Dragon Prince is to be married off to the head of the house, one of the fallen angels. And I enjoyed that very much. And there's a rebellion going on in the Dragon Kingdom. In the third book, we have a huge disaster happening with houses exploding and entity fighting or taking revenge on all the houses and all the people in Paris, basically, and the events happening. Like I said, I really enjoyed the Dragon Prince and the Fallen Angel as characters, but we have a multitude of other characters who are also interesting, and we share their perspectives. The 3 books keep changing perspectives of narrators and where we are, and we have a huge cast of people of different, let's say, origin. We have the dragons, we have the fallen angels, we have mortals, we have immigrants and their community. We have an immortal, or maybe a few more immortals later on, and all the things going on there. It's fascinating. I really enjoy the magic world because the dragons and the immortals have different kind of magic than the fallen angels have. There's a lot of power dynamics being criticized and talked about. There's also the aspect of colonization, because the immigrants, the outside community that was brought to Paris in the Great War, especially to fight the Great War for the fallen angels and their cannon fodder, basically. And all the things we learn about that, it's really fascinating. I highly recommend this, and I cannot only say that because that's what I read all months. There was no other reading done, apart from audiobooks, of course. On audio, I listened to quite a few things. Let's start with the two nonfiction books I listened to. One was Escape into Meaning by the Nerdwriter, and if you know the channel The Nerdwriter here on YouTube, you know what to expect. The essays were similar to the videos he makes, the video essays, and more deep dive into different topics. I enjoyed listening to it. The author reads it himself, and it was a pleasure to listen to it while I was out walking. It was a pleasure to dive into these topics rather deep. But then again, I noticed that I don't interact with the essays or the topics aside from listening to them, which is fine. You don't have to. And I noticed that they were good company while I was out, and they were a good distraction from all the random thoughts I had this month. So for that, I really, really enjoyed it. I can highly recommend it if you are interested in just random essays about random topics. The other nonfiction book I listened to was Fortitude, and I got to this book because I listened to the author's podcast where he talked about the book for a while, announcing it, and I was curious. The book sort of looks at resilience from a different point of view, and rather critically at the data around the resilience literature and what it means that it's pushed upon us. I don't know, everybody feels like you need to be more resilient these days, and it's your fault if you're not. And I'm exhausted, so I thought, why not listen to all of this and see what it all means and where it all comes from. And it was very interesting and data packed. The critical view on the data that a lot of the resilience literature is based upon was fascinating. What I missed, or what the book lacked, was a clear alternative or what to do with this information. So I felt a little bit lost at the ending, which doesn't take away from all the interesting data and analysis that came before. I also listened to some nonfiction. I listened to The Old Woman with the Knife, which was sort of I'll like the cover and see what's it about by. And it's about this grandmother assassin, or rather this assassin who grew old and is an old woman now and still working, but struggling with her health and all the other things, and also with keeping up with getting respect from the younger crowd. And there's things happening. We also get some flashbacks on how she became an assassin and what all of this meant. I really enjoyed it. It was nothing spectacular. It was a nice story around growing old in a profession that doesn't really accept old people and women, partly, and it was entertaining. In September, Travel by Bullet also came out, which is the third book in the Dispatcher series. I highly enjoy that series. It's short books, around 3 or 4 hours on the audiobook side, and we always follow one murder mystery or crime story that needs to be solved. So there's a mystery that needs to be solved, and we're in the world of the Dispatcher where people can't be murdered anymore because they just keep coming back to life. And this one was just as enjoyable as the first two. In the book, a pandemic also happens, so that is something that happens. But I think it's getting more and more common that we find books that really deal with the pandemic or have the pandemic now in the background that it happened. So I've read quite a few of those now, and it's getting better to read about pandemics. So I don't know what that says about us or me. Anyways, the last two fiction books I listened to were, well, the second was basically finished in October, but we're not counting there. And those were the Monk and Robot series, or T-Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers. If you remember, I didn't really get along with A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I really didn't like that book, so I avoided Becky Chambers. But I kept hearing people rave about these two books, how wonderful and special they are, how enlightening and mind-blowing, and yeah, all the great words. And I liked them. I got along with them a lot better than with the Wayfarer series, but I don't see the specialty about it. It is a nice narration about this young tea monk or person trying to change their vocation and then becoming a tea monk and then meeting a robot and then traveling with the robot for 2 books so far. And while all of that is nice and we get some world building, which is also interesting, I fail to see what the greatness of the books are. For me, they felt a little bit like books around philosophical questions of purpose, identity, community, and where your place is in society and how societies work a little bit. So I enjoyed them, I guess. I don't know if I would recommend them to anyone. And that were all the books I read in September and the first weekend of October. Anyways, let me know in comments if you have read any of the books I talked about, if you enjoyed them, if you heard of them, if you want to read them, anything. Let's talk books. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.